by the way Glenn Miller played.
Songs that made the hit parade.
All in the Family didn't just change television, it changed America. But behind Archie, Edith, and the laughter were truths the cast kept hidden. Until now, the man inside the chair, Carroll O'Connor. To understand All in the Family, you have to start with the man in the armchair, Carroll O'Connor. He wasn't just the star of the show. In many ways, he was the show. His portrayal of Archie Bunker is one of the most iconic and complex performances in television history. But the man himself was a universe away from the character he played. John Carroll O'Connor was born in Manhattan in 1924 and raised in Queens, the very borough his famous character would later call home. He was the son of a lawyer and a teacher, and his upbringing was steeped in education and intellectual curiosity. He was a learned man, a scholar even. He attended the University of Montana, where he met his future wife, Nancy Fields, and later earned his master's degree in speech from the same institution after serving in the Merchant Marine during World War II. He was fluent in multiple languages and had a deep love for literature and history. This intellectual background is perhaps the most significant thing most fans never quite grasped about the man who played America's most famous blue-collar bigot. His early acting career was a long, hard slog. He worked extensively in theater in Europe and New York before moving to Hollywood. For years, he was a character actor, a reliable face you'd see in dozens of movies and television shows, often playing gruff military officers, cops, or villains. He worked with major stars like Kirk Douglas and John Wayne, but superstardom eluded him. He was in his late 40s, a working actor but hardly a household name, when a producer named Norman Lear came calling. Lear was developing a controversial new sitcom based on a British show called Till Death Us Do Part, and he was looking for his Archie Bunker. He had already offered the role to other actors, including Mickey Rooney, who turned it down flat, horrified by the character's bigotry. O'Connor was hesitant, too. He was living in Rome at the time, enjoying a successful career in European films, and the idea of moving back to the States for a TV show that would almost certainly be cancelled after a few episodes seemed like a huge risk. He was so sure it would fail that he only agreed to do the pilot after demanding the producers pay for his round-trip ticket back to Italy. He figured he'd be home in a few weeks. He couldn't have been more wrong. From the very beginning, O'Connor's relationship with the character of Archie was deeply complicated. He understood that for the show's satire to work, Archie couldn't just be a monster, he had to have a human side. O'Connor fought to give Archie moments of vulnerability, confusion, and even pathos. He knew that the audience had to see the fear and insecurity that fueled Archie's prejudice. This was a man who felt the world was changing too fast and leaving him behind. His anger was a defense mechanism. O'Connor masterfully layered these nuances into his performance. He once said, "The biggest lie in the show was that he was lovable. He was a bigot, but to play him, I had to find a way to love him." This artistic tug-of-war between the character's ugly words and the actor's empathetic portrayal is what made Archie Bunker so compelling. O'Connor was a staunch liberal in his personal life, a supporter of civil rights and progressive causes. The irony of him becoming famous for playing a character who stood for everything he opposed was never lost on him. He used his deep understanding of history and human nature to inform the character, making Archie a product of his time and environment, a man more to be pitied than purely hated. This intellectual and artistic investment often led to fierce clashes on set, particularly with Norman Lear and the writers. O'Connor was fiercely protective of Archie. He would argue over lines, demanding changes to the script if he felt a joke was too cheap, or a line made Archie seem stupid rather than simply ignorant. He felt the writers sometimes sacrificed the character's integrity for a quick laugh. These arguments were legendary. They were often shouting matches, with O'Connor, a formidable intellect, debating the nuances of a single word for hours. To some, he was difficult and combative. To others, he was the show's artistic conscience, the guardian of its complex central character. These creative battles took a toll, leading to highly publicized contract disputes. In 1974, he walked off the show in a salary dispute, and the producers prepared to write Archie out of the series. The network panicked, a settlement was reached, and O'Connor returned. But the tension remained a constant presence throughout the show's run. He wasn't just an actor reading lines. He was a co-creator of Archie Bunker, and he fought tooth and nail to ensure that creation was portrayed with the depth and humanity he believed it deserved. After the main series ended, he continued to play the character in the spin-off, Archie Bunker's Place, which saw Archie become a more mellow and tolerant figure after the death of his beloved Edith. For over a decade, Carroll O'Connor lived inside the mind of Archie Bunker, a partnership that changed television and cemented his place as one of the finest actors of his generation. The soul of the show, John Stapleton. If Carroll O'Connor was the blustering, conflicted heart of All in the Family, Jean Stapleton was its gentle, resilient soul. Her portrayal of Edith Bunker, Archie's seemingly submissive and scatterbrained wife, was a masterclass in comedic timing and emotional depth. Like O'Connor, Stapleton was a world away from the character she so famously inhabited. She was a highly intelligent, sophisticated, and classically trained actress, with a rich career in theatre long before television made her a household name. Born Jean Murray in 1923 in New York City, she was the daughter of an opera singer and a billboard advertising salesman. She found her calling early, studying, acting, and making her Broadway debut in the 1950s. For nearly 2 decades, she was a celebrated figure on the New York stage, earning Tony Award nominations for her work in hit musicals like Damn Yankees and Funny Girl. She was a consummate professional, a character actress known for her versatility and her unique, unforgettable voice. That voice, which would become Edith's signature, was something Stapleton had carefully cultivated over years of stage work. It wasn't her natural speaking voice, it was a character choice, a high-pitched, slightly nasal sound that perfectly captured Edith's innocence and guileless nature. When Norman Lear was casting the role of Edith, he remembered seeing Stapleton in a play and knew she was the one. Stapleton, however, was committed to another project at the time and almost missed the opportunity. Fate intervened, and she became available just as Lear was getting desperate. From her first reading, it was clear she was born to play the part. She understood Edith from the inside out. She saw that Edith wasn't a dingbat, as Archie so often called her. Stapleton saw her as a woman with a deep well of kindness, an unshakable faith in the goodness of people, and a simple, homespun wisdom that often cut through Archie's bluster to reveal a profound truth. She once explained her approach by saying, "She is a gullible, innocent, and trusting soul. She is not a nitwit. She is a very sensible woman who is not educated. Her wisdom is the wisdom of the heart." This deep empathy for the character was Stapleton's secret weapon. She never played Edith for laughs. She played her for truth, and the laughter came naturally from the honesty of the situation. Throughout the show's run, Stapleton worked tirelessly to ensure Edith evolved. She fought against the character becoming a one-note joke. In the early seasons, Edith is often the passive recipient of Archie's tirades. But as the series progressed, Stapleton, with the support of the writers, began to imbue Edith with a quiet strength. There were landmark episodes where Edith stood up for herself and her beliefs, challenging Archie in ways that left him and the audience stunned. One of the most powerful examples was an episode in the 8th season where Edith is the victim of an attempted assault. The episode handled the subject with incredible sensitivity for its time, and Stapleton's performance was heartbreakingly real. It showed the terror and trauma of the experience, but also Edith's incredible resilience. In another groundbreaking episode, she confronts a crisis of faith after a friend is murdered, a storyline that showcased Stapleton's immense dramatic range. These moments were crucial. They transformed Edith from a simple comedic foil into one of the most beloved and complex female characters in television history. She became the moral center of the show, a beacon of compassion in a world of prejudice and anger. By 1979, after 8 seasons, John Stapleton felt that she had explored every facet of Edith Bunker. She was a dedicated artist, and she feared that staying in the role any longer would lead to stagnation. She wanted to return to the theatre and tackle new challenges. When All in the Family was retooled into Archie Bunker's Place, she agreed to appear in a handful of episodes to help launch the new series, but she made it clear to the producers that she was ready to move on. Her decision led to one of the most poignant and shocking moments in sitcom history. At the beginning of the 2nd season of Archie Bunker's Place, it was revealed that Edith had died suddenly of a stroke. The episode in which Archie grapples with his grief, alone in their bedroom, is a testament to both O'Connor's acting and the profound impact Stapleton's character had on the show and its audience. It was a brave and heartbreaking choice, but Stapleton stood by it. She had given the world a beautiful, enduring character, but she knew, with an artist's instinct, that it was time to say goodbye. She went on to have a distinguished career in theatre, film, and television, but to millions, she would always be the sweet, funny, and surprisingly strong Edith Bunker. The unbreakable bond, Archie and Edith. The relationship between Archie and Edith Bunker was the bedrock of the entire series, a wonderfully complex portrait of a long-term marriage that felt more real than anything television had seen before. On the surface, it was a dynamic of dominance and submission. Archie barked his orders, famously yelling, "Stifle yourself!" whenever Edith's train of thought went off the rails. He belittled her, called her a dingbat, and dismissed her opinions with a wave of his hand. Yet, what Carroll O'Connor and John Stapleton so brilliantly conveyed was the deep, unshakable love that existed just beneath that noisy surface. For all his complaining, Archie was utterly dependent on Edith. She was his anchor, the one who packed his lunch, darned his socks, and provided the unwavering emotional support that allowed him to be himself, flaws and all. The actors understood this unspoken contract perfectly. Their on-screen chemistry wasn't about romantic sparks, it was about the worn-in comfort of two people who had shared a lifetime. O'Connor would often reach out and touch Stapleton's arm or hand in a scene, a small, almost unconscious gesture of affection that wasn't in the script but spoke volumes about Archie's hidden feelings. Stapleton, in turn, would look at him with an expression of such pure, unconditional love that it could melt the heart of the most cynical viewer. Fans never forgot the moments when the facade cracked, like when Archie breaks down and confesses his deepest fears to her, or the simple, tender way he would say, "Aw, geez," in a moment of vulnerability. It was a real marriage, full of frustration and comfort, arguments and unbreakable loyalty, and it was their masterful, nuanced performances that made it one of the most believable and beloved television couples of all time. The director in disguise, Rob Reiner, playing Michael Meathead Stivic, the liberal graduate student who was a constant thorn in Archie Bunker's side, was an actor who seemed destined for a life in comedy. Rob Reiner was born in 1947 in the Bronx, New York, into Hollywood royalty. His father was the legendary comedian, writer, and director Carl Reiner, the creator of The Dick Van Dyke Show. His mother, Estelle, was an actress and singer. Growing up, the Reiner household was a hub of comedic genius, with frequent visitors like Mel Brooks and Sid Caesar. It was an incredible environment for a budding performer, but it also came with immense pressure. Reiner struggled to find his own identity, dropping out of college to pursue acting and joining a local improv comedy troupe. He landed a few writing gigs and small acting parts, but his big break came when Norman Lear, a close family friend, cast him as Mike Stivic. Lear needed an actor who could go toe-to-toe with Carroll O'Connor, someone who could convincingly argue the progressive talking points of the younger generation. Reiner, with his quick wit and passionate liberal convictions, was the perfect fit. The on-screen dynamic between Archie and Mike was the engine that drove the show. Their arguments were the stuff of legend, a weekly primetime debate over every hot-button issue of the 1970s. The Vietnam War, affirmative action, gun control, and social welfare. What made these scenes so electric was that the conflict wasn't just acting. Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner had a genuine, if respectful, off-screen friction. O'Connor, the classically trained, deeply intellectual actor, often approached the script from a character and story perspective. Reiner, younger and more politically charged, saw the show as a vehicle for social commentary. They would have intense debates in rehearsal, not unlike the ones their characters had on screen. Reiner would argue for lines that made a stronger political point, while O'Connor would push back if he felt it made Archie too much of a caricature. This creative tension, this real-life clash of ideas and generations, is what made their scenes together so authentic and powerful. It wasn't just Archie versus Mike. It was O'Connor's carefully crafted character study versus Reiner's passionate activism. What most fans didn't realize at the time was that Reiner wasn't just a talented actor. He was also a gifted writer and director in the making. He began writing scripts for the show, penning several memorable episodes. He also started to develop an interest in what was happening behind the camera. He watched the director's work, studied how shots were set up, and learned the mechanics of putting a show together. He was absorbing everything, preparing for the next phase of his career. By the late 1970s, after several seasons on the show, both Reiner and his on-screen wife, Sally Struthers, were feeling the constraints of their roles. They were huge stars, but they were also typecast. They worried they would be Meathead and Gloria forever. They decided it was time to leave the show together. Their departure in 1978, with Mike and Gloria moving to California, marked a major turning point for the series. For Reiner, it was a leap of faith that paid off spectacularly. He transitioned almost immediately into directing, and his career behind the camera would eclipse even his fame as an actor. He went on to direct an incredible string of hit films. He became one of the most successful and respected directors in Hollywood, a career path that began with him taking notes, both mental and literal, on the set of a sitcom in Queens, More Than a Little Girl. Sally Struthers. Sally Struthers played Gloria, the bunker's daughter, and Mike's wife, the emotional bridge between Archie's old-world views and the meathead's modern liberalism. She was often caught in the middle, trying to keep the peace while forging her own identity as a young woman in the feminist wave of the 1970s. Struthers, born in 1947 in Portland, Oregon, was a relative newcomer when she was cast in the role that would make her famous. She had a few minor television and film credits to her name, but All in the Family was her big break. She won the role of Gloria with her impeccable comedic timing and an ability to convey both bubbly energy and deep emotional vulnerability. Her on-screen persona was that of the little girl, as Archie always called her. But behind the scenes, Struthers was a determined and ambitious actress who, like her castmates, fought for her character's development. Initially, Gloria was portrayed as a sweet, but somewhat naive young woman, often echoing the opinions of her husband, Mike. But as the series progressed, Struthers pushed for the character to grow and mature. She wanted Gloria to become more independent, to find her own voice, and to challenge not only her father's traditional views, but also her husband's sometimes condescending liberalism. The writers responded, and Gloria's journey became a central theme of the show. We saw her struggle with her role as a wife and mother, her desire for a career of her own, and her evolving feminist consciousness. In one notable storyline, Gloria deals with a personal assault, a parallel story to Edith's that showed the issue affected women of all generations. These storylines allowed Struthers to showcase her considerable dramatic talents and helped make Gloria a relatable figure for millions of young women who were navigating the same cultural changes in their own lives. Her on-screen chemistry with Rob Reiner was a key part of the show's success. They were believable as a young couple in love, full of passion, idealism, and the occasional squabble. Like the other principal actors, Struthers' journey with the show was not without its conflicts. As her fame grew, so did her desire for better pay and more creative input. In the mid-1970s, she, along with Reiner, became embroiled in a contract dispute with the producers. At the time, All in the Family was the #1 show on television, but the salaries for the supporting actors hadn't kept pace with the show's massive success. The dispute was contentious and played out in the press, but eventually, a new deal was reached. However, the experience left a mark. By 1978, Struthers felt, as Reiner did, that she had taken the character as far as she could. She was eager to pursue other opportunities and avoid being typecast forever as Archie Bunker's little girl. After leaving the show, she remained a familiar face on television, starring in her own short-lived spin-off, Gloria, and making guest appearances on numerous other shows. She also became a prominent advocate for child-focused charities, a role she has dedicated herself to for decades. While she may always be best known as Gloria, her work on the show was instrumental in creating a character who grew from a girl into a woman, right before America's eyes. The counterculture couple, Mike and Gloria. As a couple, Mike and Gloria represented the changing face of America. They were the voice of the youth counterculture, bringing the ideals of the late 1960s crashing into the working-class traditionalism of the bunker home. Their very presence in Archie's house was a daily referendum on the future of the American family. He was a long-haired, Polish-American intellectual who questioned authority. She was his loving but increasingly independent wife, struggling to reconcile the world she was raised in with the new one she wanted to build. Their dynamic was crucial because it wasn't just about love and marriage, it was about ideology, Their storylines often revolved around the challenges of a modern relationship. Arguments over gender roles, decisions about raising children, and the financial struggles of a young couple trying to make it on their own. They were the show's progressive engine, constantly pushing Archie's buttons and forcing the audience to confront new ideas about feminism, education, and social justice. What many fans might not have realized was how their relationship also mirrored the show's internal creative debates. Rob Reiner, like Mike, was the passionate liberal pushing for stronger political statements, while the writers had to balance that with the family dynamics represented by Gloria, who had to mediate between her husband and her father. Their on-screen struggles were, in many ways, a reflection of the very conversations that were shaping the show behind the scenes, making them the perfect symbol of a generation in transition. Secrets from 704 Hauser Street. The groundbreaking nature of All in the Family meant that almost every aspect of its production was a battle. The man leading the charge was the show's visionary creator, Norman Lear. Lear based the show on a British sitcom, Till Death Us Do Part, but he infused it with a uniquely American sensibility. He was determined to use the sitcom format to talk about real-world issues, to hold a mirror up to American society. This was a radical idea in the early 1970s. Television, especially comedy, was a landscape of sanitized, escapist fare. Lear's vision was to create a show that generated not just laughter, but also dialogue. From the very beginning, he was at war with the network censors at CBS. The executives were terrified of the script. The language, the subject matter, the raw prejudice of Archie Bunker, it was unlike anything they had ever seen. They tried to water it down, to soften the edges, but Lear refused. He fought for every hell and damn, and more importantly, he fought for the integrity of the show's controversial themes. The network was so nervous about the premiere episode that they hired extra operators to handle the flood of angry phone calls they were sure would come. They also insisted on adding a disclaimer at the beginning of the show, which read, "The program you are about to see is All in the Family. It seeks to throw a humorous spotlight on our frailties, prejudices, and concerns. By making them a source of laughter, we hope to show in a mature fashion just how absurd they are." And that disclaimer itself was a sign of how revolutionary the show was. The phone calls did come, but so did the letters of praise, and, most importantly, the ratings. The show was a slow starter, but through word of mouth, it built an audience, and, by the end of its first season, was a certified hit. A huge part of its success was its unique production style. Unlike most sitcoms of the era, which were shot on film with a laugh track added later, All in the Family was shot on videotape in front of a live studio audience. Lear made this choice deliberately. He wanted the laughter to be real and spontaneous. He wanted the show to feel like a live theatrical performance, capturing the raw energy of the actors and the genuine reaction of the audience. This method was more stressful and technically challenging, but it paid off. The live audience became a character in itself, its laughter, and sometimes its shocked silence, adding another layer to the viewing experience. Taping nights were electric events in Hollywood, with audiences lining up for hours to get a seat. The show's success spawned an entire universe of television shows. It was the launching pad for one of the most successful strings of spin-offs in history. First came Maude, centered on Edith's liberal, sharp-tongued cousin, played by B. Arthur. Maude itself was just as controversial as its predecessor, famously tackling the issue of abortion in a two-part episode in 1972. Then came The Jeffersons. The Bunker's next-door neighbors, Lionel and Louise Jefferson, were the first middle-class African-American family to be the focus of a major sitcom. Their moving on up to a deluxe apartment in the sky became an iconic moment in television history, and the show was a massive hit, running for 11 seasons. After the main series ended, there was Archie Bunker's Place, which continued Archie's story. And there were even spin-offs of spin-offs, like Good Times, which was spun off from Maude. Norman Lear created a television empire that dominated the ratings throughout the 1970s, and it all started in that shabby living room in Queens. He changed not just what topics television could talk about, but how it could talk about them, using laughter to disarm prejudice and start a national conversation. The echo in the living room. The legacy of All in the Family is impossible to overstate. It fundamentally and permanently altered the television landscape. Before Archie Bunker settled into his armchair, The sitcom was a place of gentle fantasy. Fathers always knew best, mothers never raised their voices, and no problem was so great it couldn't be solved with a quiet chat and a warm smile before the credits rolled. All in the Family shattered that illusion. It dragged the American sitcom, kicking and screaming, into the real world. It proved that audiences were not only ready for, but hungry for, comedy that was relevant, intelligent, and fearless. The show demonstrated that you could tackle the most divisive issues of the day, racism, sexism, war, and political polarization, within a 30-minute comedy format, and not only survive, but thrive. It won a staggering number of Emmy Awards during its run and was the #1 rated show in the United States for 5 consecutive years, a feat that has rarely been matched. Its cultural impact went far beyond ratings and awards. The show forced families to talk. The arguments that played out on the bunker's iconic living room set were echoed in living rooms all across the country. It gave people a language to discuss their own prejudices and to debate the seismic changes happening in society. Archie Bunker became a national reference point, a flawed, tragicomic figure who represented a mindset that was being challenged on all fronts. The terms Archie Bunker and meathead entered the American lexicon, shorthand for a clash of generations and ideologies. While some critics at the time worried that the show might be glorifying bigotry by making a prejudiced character lovable, the overwhelming effect was the opposite. By exposing Archie's ignorance to the light of day and allowing it to be defeated week after week by logic, compassion, and simple human decency, the show performed a kind of national therapy. It used laughter not to ignore our problems, but to confront them head-on. Decades after it went off the air, the show remains startlingly relevant. The issues it tackled are still the issues we grapple with today. The generation gap, the political divides, the arguments over social progress, it all feels incredibly familiar. The genius of the show, and of the incredible cast who brought it to life, was its profound understanding of human nature. It knew that people are complicated, that love and frustration can exist in the same family, and that sometimes the only way to get through the toughest conversations is with a little bit of laughter. Carroll O'Connor, Gene Stapleton, Rob Reiner, and Sally Struthers were more than just actors. They were cultural trailblazers who, under the guidance of Norman Lear, created a show that didn't just entertain America, it changed it. They opened the door for every socially conscious comedy that followed, proving that a simple sitcom, set in a modest house in Queens, could be one of the most powerful forces for change in the world. Decades later, the cast's revelations remind us why All in the Family remains one of TV's most groundbreaking shows, and why its impact still surprises fans today.